So I think where conjoint works well is when you've got a relatively low average selling price and a high number of buyers or transactions. And then where conjoint works less well is when you're doing deals that are six figures or more and the volume is relatively small compared to the volume of like a typical consumer product.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the undeniable relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and today our guest is Kevin Christian. Here are three things you want to know about Kevin before we start. He's been in pricing in Silicon Valley for over 20 years now. He used to program conjoint models to analyze price elasticity in the mid-1990s. What a geek. And he's worked at Netscape. Wow. Do we know anybody who's worked at Netscape? Oh, and I'm going to give you a bonus one. He used to teach comedy traffic school. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Mark, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing fabulous. Thanks. I got to ask, comedy traffic school, do they give you the jokes or do you have to make them up yourself?
Mostly they give you the jokes. There's, you go through training and there's kind of a script, but I did make them up as I was going along as well.
Okay. And was it a fun job?
It was, it was something I did in my 20s and it was just to make a little extra spending money to buy records and CDs.
Yeah. That's just a fun job. I can't imagine doing it. Well, today's podcast is going to be a little bit different. It's somewhat of an experiment. Normally I interview the guest and then I share my opinion, but today Kevin gets to choose the topics that we're going to talk about. And we're just going to have conversations about them. We'll get to hear what Kevin thinks. We'll get to hear what I think. And I'm positive there will be lessons for everybody as we go through this. So Kevin, what's our first topic?
Okay, so for the first topic, I'd like to talk about coffee and going out for coffee and getting coffee in the morning, because I'm a person who goes out to a coffee shop and gets my coffee 7 days a week. And I have three different places that I go to that are close to my house. And I order the same drink regardless of which place I go to. It's a double espresso with a long pull. And at Starbucks, they charge $2.45. At Il Piccolo, which is a small privately owned place, they charge $2.80. And at Pete's Coffee, they charge $3.25. But for me, when I wake up in the morning, which place I'm going to go to has nothing to do with the price. If Il Piccolo is open, I generally like to go there first because I like to support the little guy. But they don't open until 6:30, and usually I'm open by 5:30, so they're just not open yet. And Pete's I only go to really on the weekends when I have a little more time and there's a coffee klatch and I sit there and kind of chit chat with people while I'm having my coffee. But if I get up early and if it's during the week when I have to go to work, I generally go to Starbucks because I don't want to chit chat at Pete's and Il Piccolo doesn't open until 6:30. So my choice of which place I buy my coffee has nothing to do with the price, even though the prices are very different. So I was wondering what you think about that.
I think that's hilarious. First question is, what is a long pull?
It just means they run a little bit extra water through the double espresso. So you're not getting more coffee grounds. You're just getting more water in your double espresso.
Oh, okay. I always thought it made the coffee a little more bitter when you did that.
Maybe, I don't know, but that's just how I like it.
Okay. No worries. No worries. So let's talk about the decision that you make, because pricing is always fascinating when we get to see how do people make decisions and do they use price or don't they use price? And I think you very clearly articulated how you go about making a decision. But the least expensive of the three, Starbucks at $2.45, and the most expensive of the three was Pete's at, what was it, $3.25?
$3.25, yep.
$3.25. Right. So there's an 80-cent swing between the most expensive and the least expensive. And from the description that you gave me, 80 cents was totally irrelevant to you.
Correct.
So it wasn't that price didn't matter. It was really that the other attributes far outweighed the difference in price.
Yeah, the things I care about are How much time do I have to spare? Wanting to support the little guy. Is the little guy open yet? Because he opens later than the other two. Those are kind of the things I care about. And even though there's these differences in the price just doesn't come into me selecting which place to go for the coffee.
Yep. And so there's two possible reasons. Number one, it could be that the price really didn't matter. Or number two, it could be that you've already made the decision and you just don't want to rethink it every day. Oh, here's the process I go through. I don't have to make that decision anymore. Let's pretend like you're going to make the decision every single day. What if you wake up late, it's after 6:30, Il Piccolo is open, and you remember they just raised their prices to $6. You still going?
No, not at $6.
Okay, so price does matter. It's just that small swing wasn't enough to make an impact in your decision.
See, and what that means to me in the real world is that a lot of businesses probably have an opportunity to raise prices by a little bit, which could make a huge difference to them at the end of the year in terms of their profitability, and probably wouldn't make much of a difference to their customers if it's a small dollar item.
Oh, I think that's so true. If you think about a coffee shop, I think it's probably pretty rare that someone says, "Oh, I'm going to Starbucks instead of Pete's because the coffee is less expensive."
Yeah, I doubt that ever happens.
And if it does, it's a tiny, tiny piece of the time. So and maybe that's what Starbucks realized back when they charged $1.50, and now they're up to $2.45.
Yeah, I mean, I think people pick the coffee place based on which one they like the ambiance better, which one is closer to their home, which one can they find parking if they're in a very busy urban area, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's pretty fascinating. Just thinking about how people make decisions and trying to beat that up. So if you're a coffee company, you're going to raise price, a coffee shop, you're going to raise prices by 10%, 10 cents, probably doesn't impact demand at all. And you just made a lot more profit. I think that was a great call on that.
Yeah, and I don't want Starbucks or Il Piccolo or Pete's to raise their prices by 10%, but that would be my guess. My guess would be that if they did, they'd be more profitable and it wouldn't make a huge difference to the customers.
Yep, I think I agree with that. Okay, let's do the next topic. But do you have one that's on conjoint? Because you used to work in conjoint, and that would be a fun topic to talk about.
Yep. So for 5 years, between 92 and 97, I worked for a company in Menlo Park called Applied Decision Analysis. And we did a lot of different things. We did market analysis, decision analysis, risk analysis. And in the market analysis space, one of the things that we did was building conjoint models for helping companies optimize pricing. And so there's a couple things I wanted to talk to you about or ask you about. So one is, what are the differences between conjoint in a B2B space versus a B2C space, if you think there is any difference? And then the other one is, what are the limitations of conjoint, if any, and how do you correct for those? And I've got my own ideas on this from having done it for 5 years, but I know you have your own ideas as well.
I'm a little embarrassed or a little worried about this one because I think your ideas are going to be way better than mine, but I'll take a shot. I think let's do the B2B versus B2C first. It seems to me that it's less about, am I selling to businesses or consumers? And it's more about, how big is my pool of customers? And do I have a direct sales force or not?
Yeah, I agree with that.
I would think that if I don't have a direct sales force, so I'm selling through retail or I'm selling on the web, what that says is that I can only set one price. I can give a set of messages out, and I've got to find a way to capture or set that optimal price for that optimal buyer in the right situation. And for that, I think conjoint is almost ideal. It's almost perfect for us saying, okay, we're going to go do conjoint with 300 or 500 different respondents. And now we can look at the different decisions each of those respondents would make, and we can start to create, well, how would we segment this, or how would we put this product together, and what prices would we charge? And suddenly we're gathering probably the most important information you can get when you're setting your packaging and your pricing.
Yeah, I mean, let me say the same thing maybe in a slightly different way. So I think where conjoint works well is when you've got a relatively low, let's say under 10,000 or under $1,000. I don't know what the cutoff is, but a relatively low average selling price and a high number of buyers or transactions. And then where conjoint works less well is when you're doing deals that are six figures or more, and the volume is relatively small compared to the volume of like a typical consumer product. And I guess what I've seen a lot in the B2B space is you're typically dealing with situations where it's a direct sales force, the deals are highly negotiated, and the deal sizes are typically six figures or more. And so in the B2B space, in my experience, just conjoint isn't as obviously the right way to get your optimal price as it is in the B2C space, where you've got lower selling prices, higher volume of items.
Yeah. What's interesting about the B2B is if you could do conjoint for the client that you're selling to, that would be amazing, because what you're now capturing is that one respondent's willingness to pay, how much they value each of the different attributes or features in your product. That would just be the absolute perfect information for that one client for that one negotiation. The problem we have is we tend to do conjoint so that we can make decisions for markets, and a single customer is not going to sit down and do a conjoint with us so that we can negotiate better with them. They're going to play a little bit of poker and hide their cards a little bit and not give us all that information. So I think the buyers are making decisions in the exact same ways, but we don't get the tool that we would use. And instead, we have to rely on our salespeople to try to discern what is it that our buyers really value.
Yes, you said something really interesting there, which was playing poker and hiding your cards. And it's kind of this game of the negotiation that goes on. And I think you just don't have that in a situation where you're buying a tube of toothpaste at Walgreens, or where I'm buying my cup of coffee at Starbucks or Piccolo or Pete's. And so I think conjoint works great in those situations. And then when you get into these more behavioral things around procurement people and their skills in negotiation, and the fact that they're going to make this purchase once every 3 to 5 years. And so they invest a lot of time and energy into this purchase, and it's a huge part of their budget. And also they have too many things they need to buy. If it's an IT department, the IT department cannot buy all of the things they think they need to buy. And so it just becomes a much different purchase decision.
I agree completely. All right, next topic. Let's go. Oh, no, we were going to do something else on conjoint. What was the other thing on conjoint?
Well, I guess, so we talked a little bit about the difference between B2B and B2C. We did that. And then the other thing that I thought we could talk about is, okay, so what are the limitations of conjoint and how can you improve upon it? So I've got one idea that I'll throw out, and then you can throw out any that you might have. One thing that I've seen with conjoint is that sometimes there's a difference between what happens in the study, which is a lab situation or an experiment when you're doing your market research study, and then what happens in the real world. And sometimes the purchase behavior in the real world is not exactly the same as the purchase behavior inside the conjoint study itself. It's like the difference between a movie of a horse running and a horse that's actually running through the room that you're in, right? It's different. The actual horse is different than a movie of the horse. And so I think the conjoint study is more like the movie, and then what happens in the real world is more like the horse running through the room. And so I think one of the things that happens is when respondents overstate their willingness to pay, as the vendor of the market research study, as the person doing the conjoint analysis, and this is something we used to do, is you need to do some kind of correction for willingness to pay. And so the way we would do that is the client knew what their actual market share was and what the market share was of their competitors. And so we would take the results we got from the conjoint and we would build our model, and we would let the model then come up with its market share predictions. And then we would say, okay, we think the willingness to pay is overstated. And then we would start to dial it down, and we would take the utilities inside the conjoint model and multiply by a number, 0.9, 0.85, 0.8. We would multiply by this number less than 1 to dial the utilities down. And we would dial them down to the point where we had matched the actual market shares in the marketplace as closely as possible. And so then we said, well, that's the right correction for willingness to pay, because now we're matching the market shares in the actual marketplace as close as we can get.
Let me ask you a quick question on that. When you're doing the conjoint, oftentimes conjoint says, here are three choices. Which one would you buy? And then they ask the question, well, would you really buy one of those? And that way we could get the feeling that, okay, all three of them are way out of price, or all three of them were horrible choices, but this was the best of the three horrible choices. And did you guys ask that question?
No, the way we did it was on a 1 to 9 scale. And so think of the 1 to 9 scale as being from left to right. And there'd be an item on the left-hand side, which might have had less value, lower price, and an item on the right-hand side that had higher value, higher price. And then we would ask the respondent on a scale from 1 to 9, what's your preference between these two different purchase options? And so if they said 1, it meant they really preferred the one with the lower value, lower price. And if they said 9, it meant they really preferred the one with the higher value, higher price. And then we would start to change the prices in order to try to drive the person's, number choice more toward the middle. So if they started at 9, we're trying to get them to move from 7 and then 5. Or if they started at 1, we're trying to get them to move to 3 and then 5 or something like that. But if they start at one extreme, you're always trying to push their choices to the middle.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never seen conjoint done that way before. Normally I see conjoint done as, here's 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 different choices. Choose which one you like the best. And then we wipe the slate clean and we say, do it again. And then we wipe the slate clean and we say, do it again. And I find those to be really accurate in terms of preference, but I don't think they're that accurate, because I did mention that usually they ask the question, would you buy any of these, or would you actually buy the one that you chose? And now we're back to that preference question. And I think your horse analogy is absolutely perfect, which is what people say they're going to do and what they do are two very different things. And there needs to be a way to massage it or adopt it and say, yeah, I get it. This is what they thought they said they were going to do. But I think in the preference side, it isn't as big a deal. I think people actually choose the right product given the right feature sets, but that may not work if we're just tweaking price up and down.
How about for distinguishing between different market segments? Have you seen conjoint be effective for distinguishing between, what are the preferences or what is the right price for the healthcare vertical versus a manufacturing vertical versus a retail vertical or those kinds of things?
Yeah, not only is it awesome for that capability, it's also awesome at helping you find your market segments. Imagine for a second that we're going to go out and do 300 conjoints, and we have 5 different features that we're looking at, and one is price. And when we get back our 500 different results, we find that some people value feature 2 a lot, and they would pay us a ton of money as long as we had feature 2 in it. Well, that might be a market segment all by itself. Awesome, found a new market segment. Then we could dial back and say, well, what was common about feature 2? Or what was common about the people who liked feature 2? Oh, they were all in the medical industry. Oh, beautiful. Look at that. We're starting to segment our marketplace.
Yeah, and then you come up with a package for the medical vertical that includes that item, and then your packages for the other verticals don't. That's exactly the right way to do your packaging.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, we have time for one more. Let's make it quick.
Let's talk about the difference between bears and alligators. If a bear gets in a fight with an alligator, who wins?
Okay, now to be fair, we did brief this a little bit, but I did get the answer right the first time. And that was it depends. So what does it depend on?
I think it depends on where they're fighting. And if they're fighting on land, the bear is more likely to win. And if they're fighting in water, the alligator is more likely to win. And what I like about this for pricing is when you talk about the difference between talking to your customers about the value of the solution and talking to your customers about the price of the solution.
Expand on that. I think this is a brilliant point, but I want to make sure our listeners get this.
So I think when you're talking about the value of the solution, you're in the seller's territory, and you're talking about something where, the seller is going to benefit from that conversation. If you're only talking about the price of the item without talking about the value, then you're really in the buyer's territory. So that's like the bear, consenting to fight with the alligator in the water. If you're talking about the price of the solution without talking about the value of the solution, you're in the buyer's territory. And I think procurement people are brilliant at this. And I think they are often much better trained in negotiation than the direct salespeople are.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. But here's what I just now pictured. A procurement guy looks like an alligator sitting in the water saying, "Come on in. The water's fine. Let's fight here." And our salespeople need to say, "No, no, 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 no. Come on up to land so that we can have conversations about value. It isn't about price." Yeah, I think that's a brilliant analogy. I like it a lot. I'm not sure, even if we trained our salespeople how to negotiate well, I'm not sure that makes a huge difference, because I think the number one negotiation tactic that our salespeople have to be able to do is say, "No, I'm not going to discount." Now, I'm not saying that we say that all the time. Don't get me wrong, but what I am saying is, if we have explained the value to the people who actually made the decision, the committee or the economic buyer, and they've said, "Yes, I want your product," and then it goes to procurement. Procurement's job is to get discounts, and they're going to tell you whatever they can to get a discount, and yet they don't make the decision. So if we just had the guts to say, "No, I'm not going to give you a discount," then I'll bet you we win 90% of the deals at 20%, 30% higher prices.
Well, you said something really interesting to me when you and I first met back when, I don't know, when did we first meet? 7 or 10 years ago, somewhere around there. And I asked you how you would manage that. And what you said to me at the time was, you said that for any given segment or product or, region or whatever, that you would look at your historical discounting and sort them from high to low. And then you would try to lop off the bottom 25%.
So although I don't remember that conversation, can I just say that I was brilliant?
You agree with the idea, right?
Yeah.
You don't remember it, but you agree with the idea. And I think
Absolutely.
that's right. I think that you need to sort your historical discounts from high to low. And when deals are coming in that are in the bottom quartile, you should be working very, very hard to eliminate those and move them up at least to that second quartile.
Yes. And so that's partly in, hey, I'm renegotiating deals we have today. But the other way that I would look at that exact thing is, all new deals that are coming in, am I going to let any new deals in that bottom quartile? Why would I ever do that? I can tell you that your salespeople are going to come to you and say, "This is a strategic customer." Every customer is a strategic customer to a salesperson. So that's not the right answer. I would challenge pricing people, product people, to count or track the number of times salespeople come in and say, "This is a strategic customer. They're going to do 10 times this amount next year," and see how many times that's true. Because it is practically never true. And so I think this whole negotiating thing is really complicated and challenging. It's hard for salespeople to have the guts to say no to a discount, because why would they take the risk of losing their commission? And we as product people need some type of authority or influence to be able to say, "Yeah, this is the best you're going to get. You can't go below this point. And by the way, if you go too deep, we're probably going to cut your commissions." And now we're tracking commission rates. It really is a challenging problem to get everybody on the same page and say, "Let's go win these deals at high prices."
Agreed.
Kevin, I got to say, this has been fun. I haven't talked this much in a podcast in a long time.
Yeah, I think we went a little bit over on the time because we were a little aggressive in the number of topics we wanted to cover, but that's okay.
We did. We still have a couple more we could do too if we wanted, but we'll pull that off. Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. If anyone wants to contact you, how can they do that?
The best way is to send me an invitation to connect on LinkedIn, and in the message say that they heard the podcast, and I will definitely accept.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. All right. Episode 47 is all done. Let's see. What was my favorite part today? I like talking about alligators and bears. Kevin, did you have a favorite part?
I like talking about coffee because I can't live without it.
All right. And to our listeners, did you have a favorite part? If so, let us know in the comments of wherever you downloaded and listened to the podcast. While you're at it, would you please give us a 5-star review? These are very valuable to helping your friends and colleagues also find the podcast. We recently launched a new community at a website called championsofvalue.com. If you were to go to community.championsofvalue.com, you could sign up there, and we're going to post all of our content as we come out with podcasts or articles or blogs or the quotes that we put up on our LinkedIn site. We'll post all of our content there. That's where we're going to have conversations about them. If you have questions, if you want to interact with me, please go there. The reason that we're doing that is because I recently learned that LinkedIn only lets 10% of my followers see anything I post. And that's max. That's assuming that's a lot of interaction with that one thing. So therefore, we created this new site so you could see everything I post if you want to. We certainly hope you go there. And if you have any questions about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.